James, welcome to the show. Uh, Thank you very much, Chris. I'll see you later. James,
Hello. Good to be
hello. How are
here.
you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Fantastic. So me and James have probably sparred several times about ASPM, but you never seen us sparring around AI. And I'm really curious to hear what you have to say about your adventure in AI. And I read some of your blog and I've seen some of your posts around this. So I'm really curious. But for the few folks that don't know James has been a voice in the cybersecurity industry. Smashing the meats and smashing some of the big names like Ghana and so on, being really transparent and opinionated. That is something that I really appreciate from from an analyst. And it's been experimenting with several methods and really forward-looking things. So, James, for the few people that don't know you, can you tell us a little bit more about you, your background, and then we'll bring up the presentation.
Yeah, my background's being at mostly small startups into PagerDuty now, where we're FedRAMP in process. So I feel like I've had little touch points of everything from helping security startups to get SOC 2 through different vendor approaches and audit approaches up through, I was at a managed detection response provider, helping many customers deal with security operations, and then now helping PagerDuty finish up getting authorized finally here. So really, that's my journey.
Brilliant. Let's bring up, and today you're going to talk about the impressive journey that you had using AI for scanning for security vulnerability. So I'll let you kick it off. Thank you.
Sure. Yep. And I'm gonna be going into some real hands-on stuff here too. But really, first I wanted to just talk about where in Appsec are we currently seeing Gen AI come up the most. And I've been really surprised that it hasn't been in detection. For whatever reason, there's been a lot of hesitancy around that, and we'll get to that. But just to highlight first, these are definitely the areas where I really see this happen the most. The first is with patching and reachability, where people are using Gen AI to like read change logs on GitHub commits, to see what fixed vulnerabilities, look at how we could backport patches for them, how we can create updated workflows. And so I really think of this as like what happens when we apply AI to SCA scanning and start getting patches done. This code fixes is the thing that's definitely the most prevalent. It's definitely the lowest hanging fruit that people have gone towards, where Sneak, SemGrep, check marks, whatever SAST tool discovered this finding and then generate a fix or a patch for it. And that's definitely where people have gone first with Gen AI and their security tools. Then there's the classic scare tactics in marketing, where a lot has been drummed up about code as data leaking. I have a whole video about this, but I think that that's not a huge concern because most of the major providers have very easy check marks that are defaulted to if you're on enterprise plans about not using your data in their models. Even if they did use your data in the models, this is going to be a hot take because it's an application security conference, but that's not something that I am super concerned about just because of the way that models work. But again, regardless of how you feel about that, it's easy to opt out of. And then there's the scare tactics about hallucinated packages, which I think has a mix of reality to it. But really, a lot of this is just funding marketing as people search AI security and stuff to worry about. And these are things that come up. And then finally, the most obvious sort of use case has been the Copilot experience of trying to replace different parts of the scanner of different like analyst insight. But really, how I feel about this is like if your analyst insight can be easily replaced with Gen AI, your analysts probably aren't adding much in the first place. Just to be honest, as far as like uh, it creates a difficult issue where you're just having AI try to summarize things, which I think it's good at. But this chat experience is something that I think as these products tend to evolve from, something we're going to have to get away from. But overall, I wanted to talk today about using it in detection. And this is where I really think there's the most promise. Let me close out of this. And I wanted to do something hot and fresh here for everybody. So I looked up a hot CVE, hot out of the oven, published 10 days ago. And this is with some PHP package that I've never looked at, used before, or anything. Um, and my goal was to see, hey, can AI detect this exploit? And so I found this is the CV that gets linked to where it talks about the affected page, and it's a SQL injection with this Labyrinth filter function. So I went ahead and I've been experimenting with the biggest issue with using AI for security scanning is the token limit. And so you can see with Google doesn't yet have 1.5 Pro, which has the million token context window. They don't have it yet available via API, so you have to use their janky like uploading files interface, which isn't great. And I actually couldn't get it to work for this one, but you can see this is a lot of tokens, which is the main problem. But with the AI security scanner, I went ahead and just filtered that down to only the application controllers folder. So what it did is it sent just the content of these files to OpenAI, and you can actually see the prompt that it used in here. And this Latio tool is just something that's up on GitHub. You can just pip install it. It's very simple. All it does is use your own API key with OpenAI, and it sends them a prompt saying, "Hey, you're an application security expert like James, skilled in explaining complex programming vulnerabilities with simplicity." I said that like James is meant to be sarcastic, by the way. You will receive the full code for an application, and then it's to review it and suggest improvements. So it's a very simple prompt. There's nothing magical happening here. But you can see that when it reviewed that folder, it found first cross site scripting, where the inputs taken from these methods are used directly within the application without any sanitization. Uh, and my sense, I obviously haven't tested this more, is that that would probably be a true positive. But this is the SQL injection, and what's interesting is it found it on a separate file, but it's the same function where it has detected the same thing, where it's not using a parameterized query, and so these get injected directly into the code. And so, what is super impressive about this to me is that there's been a lot of doubt about using OpenAI to detect uh, 0-day sort of security issues. But I think it's better than humans are in a lot of different ways. And something tells me that these different ones are, yeah, different places where this function is reachable. But we can see here just with a very simple prompt, I did very little to change this. It found numerous security issues just within these files. And so if I minimize this and then go into the different, let me clear this out and just try using this on things where we can do like a sneak test here with the code tester. I think that's the right command. And so this is just to show like a typical SAST scan, right? It runs and it finds hard coded secrets. So if we go into this app.py file, all this is a Flask app that has a fake hard coded access keys in it. It has um, essentially it asks the user to input a command. It'll run it on the server. To upload a file, it'll just load the file without doing any scanning on it. They can inject some SQL. This repo is also publicly available. So it's just meant to be like this comically insecure Flask application. And so we can see here that the SAST has the hard coded secrets. It brings up path traversal, which is true. You could do that. And then the command injection and the SQL injection. And so what's interesting though is it doesn't catch like some of this contextual stuff, like this debug being set to true. Where obviously if this was used in production, you wouldn't want to set that. But because these tools have to worry about like false positives and the context, like, and they're trying to reduce noise, this is something they're probably not going to alert on intentionally, because they're trying to reduce the noise for people. But if we run the tester that just sends this straight to OpenAI, and then we wait patiently for OpenAI to respond. I'm just waiting so that we intentionally see how long it takes, because really it's yeah, it's faster than you would expect. And if there is a way you can have it stream the results back, which I just don't have set up, where it would be typing the response as we get it. I also, in case anything went wrong, have it pre filled out in this other bash session. All right. So here we have really just a full set of what's in here. So first of all, it scanned this entire folder, as opposed to like when you're using a SAST tool. One of the challenges is you're deciding like what files to pass into it, how much application context it has. And this is honestly a huge issue with when these different scanners get created and used from different tools. There's a big debate about if you scan the app like once it's been built, and then when you scan it, like if you're trying to look at the compiled application or pre-compilation, like the amount of context to give tools can often be really difficult. But here I just gave it all these files, even a .db file that it's not going to be able to fully recognize, but it still parses out like, hey, first of all, this ransomware.py file is actual ransomware, so you should probably delete that. And then it even does the IAC scanning stuff, right? Where this would, what's neat about this is in most products, this IAC scanning or the container scanning, however they wanted to look at it for the Docker file, would be like a separate product. And what I think is really helpful about using AI for this stuff is that it doesn't separate things in that way where it's like, oh, well, this is our engine for IAC scanning, but it's looking at the application more holistically in all of the files without having to segment out like all of the different pieces of it. So here it's bringing up that the application's running as root because I'm not running it in a application context, and that it's installing the Docker CLI, which is also true because in here I have just because I'm using it to intentionally test insecure things, I'm just straight up downloading and installing Docker within Docker to make it so that it's accessible from the command line, which would be bad. So it's catching those issues. And then within the app.py file, it's detecting that command injection, the arbitrary file upload, and the SQL injection. Those are the three issues that are exactly the right things to bring up. And then if this was in the context of some chat, it would be just one step away from saying, okay, well, then how do I fix it? And then it would give me the response for how to fix it. It's finding those hard coded secrets that I showed. Um, this cryptography thing is funny. It's complaining about the way that I have this ransomware.py made up after it tells me I should delete it. Um, yep, cross-site scripting, that could definitely happen. Um, Additionally, it doesn't like it's telling me contextual things around this .db file that definitely shouldn't be there. And then this cache file is actually created as part of the sneak scan, which is why that showed up. Um, so yeah, I wouldn't want to add that to the actual public repo. So, and then it gives me the fixes for them and some report. And so what's really useful about this to me, beyond sort of what we talked about with the all-in-one scanning nature of it, is that you can see that I obviously did almost nothing to try to make this a security scanner, right? Sometimes I think we overcomplicate this stuff where we think about like, oh, I need this proprietary model, or I need it to be trained on specific security data, or ways that we try to like argue that the model needs some additional help. And I really just wanted to show that like out of the box, the basic model is really good. And if we just use these models and give it some basic RAG ability to do lookups on CVEs, even if we trained it, just I think there's CVE data in the training set from what I've been able to gather where OpenAI will sometimes tell me some potential issues. Um, the If we just give it some of that like little pieces of data, sort of like how the plugins work, I think that it has an amazing ability to really do this better than when you think about the number of people that have been required to build some of these scanners, or the open source community behind them has really created a huge issue in terms of the amount of infrastructure we need to support this scanning. Whereas this is something that I did in like an hour, right? Just plugging in a very basic OpenAI um, script to just send them the data and then get this response back. So I find it to be super effective at doing that. But the catch here is that this is very not deterministic. So I think it also requires us, if we ever try to productionalize this, requires some more contextual setup of things. And so if I go to where I've run the scan before, and we'll talk about some other examples that I have in here, but where I run this file before, here it finds privileged operations inside the container where it detected the Docker CLI. But see how that was only this one finding, but back here it found the issue where it's running as root. And so there is some issues of how do we really make sure that we're getting consistent data out of these things, and a lot of that is going to be narrowing the scope of what we're scanning. And that's why I actually find even more helpful than this is doing partial scanning, where it's only looking at the changes that have been made since the last commit. Let me see if I can get that to work in this live demo environment. So here I have intentionally misspelled this as a way just to test if a scanner detects like a misspelled requirements, which you'll notice also it found in this first version of the scan, it found that there was a typo. It also found that a lot of these package versions were old, which is true. But in this one, it didn't pick those things up, which again speaks to that consistency issue where it's definitely able to detect these things. But because of the scope of doing a full scan, it has some issues finding all of it within a single scan of it. So if I just add something in here, it's that's like a fake dependency, and then just save that and then run a partial scan. Oh, hold on. Run a partial scan. Here we can see when you do a partial scan, I have it so it tells you what it's actually sending, what the changes are. And so here it's sending OpenAI what changes I've made to it. And then here, it's even using the lighter model, which is why it ran so much faster too, where it found the typo and it found the addition seems suspicious. It's not a standard package, potential security risk. And so this is where you can see with that partial scan, because the scope was a lot smaller, it ran a lot more quickly and it was able to more quickly determine the nature of the security change. So the only thing that's missing from this is the date on the model in which the model was built. Like it can obviously, it won't, it'll think in terms of what's new based on the latest data that it has access to in the model. So sometimes it's not great at like identifying this is a insecure version of this, but it does actually surprisingly have a good sense of like you're using something that is older than it should be. So let's go ahead and try changing this to like 1, which I don't even know if it's supported. So here, yeah, where it was downgraded, and then it's aware that it's outdated, like it's assuming that the context is outdated, which is really what I wanted to try to highlight with doing that. So all in all, this is one example of doing this stuff, but also just again speaking to that, like the way that ASPM products in particular have to try to differentiate between all these different types of scanners. I won't run new scans on all of this, but just since I already have it here, I ran this across a lot of different folders. So like this insecure JS folder has a lot of different exploits within it that are mostly around exploiting CVEs with vulnerabilities directly against the packages. So here it's like a vulnerability with how Lodash interprets templates, a vulnerability with how Semver interprets um, version numbers. And here it finds each of those things where there's the Lodash vulnerability, where this is what makes me think it's even within the training set. Is this what if you market this as an SCA tool, this is doing function level reachability in the sense that it's finding the CVE that like in the function that I'm executing that makes it actually vulnerable to that. And this is actually the correct fixed version that it's giving me as well, which is why, again, I'm so impressed with just out of the box the amount of context this has. Same with this JSON 5 vulnerability, where this is a prototype pollution in here, and then RDOS, which is also what this is. Same with the CVE data that's in here. Um, and then these are just different actual security issues. Yeah, that are going on within this. But once again, so you have like this SCA with function level reachability plus SAST plus code health. So there's just like so much happening within a single scan that I really don't know why we're not seeing this more often, just to be honest, as far as using it as a detection mechanism across each of these different pieces. This is the Python, which was just scanned, but I want to show this is scanning Helm charts, right? So something that personally I haven't seen a lot of innovation in is IAC scanning. I think because it's been tough to position as a separate product against like CNAP providers. So all of these pieces here are where it's detecting privileged containers. I'm mounting the Docker socket. Um, Let me actually go into these deployments so you can see. Here's where I'm just loading in environment variables. It's running in privilege mode. I'm mounting the Docker socket, which is super insecure to escape the container. And then I'm doing a lot of funky stuff with permissioning, where I'm creating service accounts and allowing them to mount to each other. These are the kinds of things where like I've scanned with individual solutions that are able to pick this up. But again, what's remarkable is that it's all in this one tool context where it's able to pick up both the sensitive data within the deployments as well as the uh, issues with the configuration itself. And it's doing that across languages. It's doing that across different types of scanning logic. So all of that to say, I once again, I really think that the value here is extremely important for using LLMs to detect these security issues, especially when we look at something like this essentially 0 day type of detection where I wish I could still I'll have to try to test this still with the XZ utils code push, because I think this is really the only way we can get to a point where there's something scanning changes as they're happening to open source projects is going to be with some sort of AI based scanner that can surface these complicated issues in a way that's reliable enough and cheap enough and fast enough to be deployed at scale with this sort of 0 day detection ability. So, uh, in conclusion, I think there's a lot of really great things that we can do with this, and I just want to help push people towards using AI with experiment with using it as a vulnerability scanner, experiment with using it as a co-pilot for doing security testing. Run full scans against your existing application or the sensitive folders within it. The only limit that you're going to run into is that token limit, where just splitting it up in the smaller folders at a time for it to scan is enough to usually assist with that. So I'll go ahead and pause there and see what questions we have.
You were brave with the scanning team, but you run the demo twice. I am impressed. We are full of questions, so let's start with this. And I think this refers to one of the video that you previously shared. Is finding it more vulnerability than Sneak on its own?
Yeah. So if we, for example, let me go into it gets into that weird because it's not deterministic, we can't know for sure like every time if it's going to. Uh, but definitely, I have a whole video comparing it with just ChatGPT. Was the name of the video? But it definitely finds more things. And when I set out to make that video, I think like most people, I assumed that Sneak SAST or really any SAST tool. I really don't mean to be picking on them with this because there's no way that a SaaS tool can have as much contextual awareness as is required to really do this well. And I think that applies even more to like niche real world functionality where it's like, oh, do you support this weird use case we have with, and we use Elixir to convert something uh, from Rust or whatever to make it really bizarre. Like it's not going to be able to combine that context in a way that is really necessary. But here you can see, Sneak found the really obvious. These two are really obvious: the path traversals, whatever, and the hard coded secrets. And then there's the debug mode enabled. So Sneak did find everything. But then here, oh, I didn't. I scanned. I didn't scan the right thing. But everything.
We'll put the link to the video
Yeah.
in the chat later, or if you can drop it before you drop off. But there was another question that was related to your talk on the freshness of the model. So package bingo will not be as good as the data when the model was trained. And I think the latest update was 2023. Sometime in 2023 was remodeled. But you can also feed some of the context. Like right now, you just fed him like base raw data and saying, with the information that you have, this is it. You could feed potentially with a link, a hook, a database of like, this is the latest, and then compare it to the latest, right?
Yeah. And I just commented the video in there. I do think that that's where work could be done to essentially. I think this could be done with OpenAI's own plugin infrastructure to make it simpler. Of just like daily. There's a bunch of different, whether it's the NVD or the other proprietary databases. Like if Vulncheck, for example, was just put on top of the training set, like that's the additional context that would allow it to have that up to date SCA scanner.
The problem is the plugin doesn't like too much database
Right.
or structured data. So we actually have tried that model, and there is our plugin that does exactly that. So you can actually train your model on the plugin using the latest data set, because we updated with CTI, but it ran kind of on the Python script. So you need to structure it in a specific way. I haven't tried it with external API call. That might be an interesting way to integrate a database service where it does a query rather than
Yep.
it just does the whole data set. But you lose the problem of context, so you're just feeding it enriched data. And the last question before we let you go.
That's holistically, it just requires a different UX to how we think about scanning.
Yeah.
That's less like I found an issue that correlates to this CVE, and it's more, this looks like an issue. Let me check if there's a CVE about it.
Yeah, I guess this brings the topic of contextual to a new level, where it's not just file level contextual, but actually project level contextual, and it brings really functionalizing reachability analysis.
And that's, I was going to fix the full scan to chop up files, but I decided to wait for the Gemini Pro context model.
Right.
But of course, it doesn't exist yet in API form. And like, boy, is this system not good that they have in like the GUI. So,
well, the API lagging a little bit behind. But anyway, Neil was asking a last question. So I bet this can be plumbed in a CI/CD pipeline as formal security review for new and old file. And then this will be the last question.
Yep.
What do you think?
Yeah. So I actually have templates for that already in the last repo. But then I also have it running here. So let's see if it actually did it. Oh, these are this is also what I use for testing security tools.
You're really pushing the team.
So here's where it ran the partial scan, and this is when I added BusyBox stuff. And so yeah, that's exactly what I have there with the workspaces set up.
All right, James, thank you so much for the brave presentation, but also really enjoyed it and enjoyed the new content. And it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for the time, and I wish you a happy recovery. And your voice did great. So well done to both of you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Phoenix, fix vulnerabilities today before attackers exploit them tomorrow.